You are not fragile. You are not soft. You are not confused. What you are is misaligned with your design. The human brain. Your brain was not sculpted in times of ease. It was engineered over thousands of years in environments that demanded intensity, clarity, and forward action. Your biology is ancient. Your brain is not a passive organ. It is a command center sculpted by pressure, forged through adversity, and wired to detect, engage, and overcome challenge. Every major structure within it, the amygdala, the hypothalamus, the prefrontal cortex, the basal ganglia, was not designed for comfort, but for survival. And survival never happened in peace. It happened in war zones, in scarcity, in environments where failure had immediate consequence. The signals that drive you, dopamine to pursue, epinephrine to focus, cortisol to mobilize, serotonin to stabilize, were not created to reward you for doing nothing. They were built to activate under fire. The reward system of your brain was designed to light up not when things are easy, but when you overcome resistance, when you endure, when you rise under weight that should have crushed you. The biology of the human brain is not neutral. It is biased for movement, for struggle, for growth through friction. You were made to chase, you were made to fight, and yet we live in a world that tells you to relax, to wait for motivation, to seek comfort and avoid stress. But the truth is, your brain doesn't understand ease. It interprets stillness as stagnation. It reads comfort as threat. Because when you're not pushing, not adapting, not aiming at something that scares you, the brain starts to fall apart. Not metaphorically, literally, neural pathways weaken, chemical systems lose balance, the circuits designed to help you survive and thrive under stress begin to collapse from lack of use. And what replaces them is not peace, it's panic, restlessness, numbness, the sense that you are built for something more, but can't quite find what it is. You weren't given this ancient engine in your skull just to coast. You were given it to pursue a mission with everything you have. When you align your actions with struggle, when you embrace controlled suffering, when you stop asking whether you feel like it and start moving anyway, something happens inside your biology. The warrior systems wake up, your pupils sharpen, your breath deepens, your heartbeat becomes a metronome for execution, and the brain begins to release chemicals that say, yes, this is what I was made for. This is not philosophy. This is not poetry. This is neuroscience. You were designed to suffer well, not to break, but to be rebuilt stronger every time you lean in. The moment you begin to see stress as the trigger for growth instead of the enemy of peace, everything changes. The fire inside you that once felt chaotic becomes a tool of clarity. That voice that whispers to stop starts to get drowned out by the one that says go. Your identity shifts from passive to active, from victim to vessel, from hesitant to hunted focus. Because the truth is, there is no peace for the warrior mind unless it's earned. You are made to bleed for something sacred, to endure for something greater, to rise again and again with breath in your lungs and battle in your bones. And your brain, this divine, designed, tested machine, is waiting for you to step back into the fight. Neural systems of focus, drive, and aggression are not philosophical traits or motivational ideas. They are real, physical circuits that live in your brain and body, and they require tension to stay alive. The prefrontal cortex is not just where your decisions are made. It's where your commitment to long-term vision is forged in real time. The dopaminergic pathways are not about fleeting pleasure. They're about sustained pursuit of a meaningful goal. The sympathetic nervous system is not there to make you anxious. It's there to prepare you to act with force and clarity. But none of these systems activate unless there is a challenge to meet, and without that challenge, they don't just sit idle. They begin to atrophy. When you live without resistance, without deliberate discomfort, the circuits that were made for war begin to decay. They were designed to be under load. They were designed to process complexity under tension, to scan the environment for threat, to lock on a target and initiate action. That's what the human machine was built for. It doesn't just tolerate hardship, it craves it in the right dose and context. But when it's not fed that demand, the architecture begins to rewire itself in the wrong direction. The prefrontal cortex stops prioritizing what matters and starts chasing novelty. The dopamine system, instead of lighting up in response to progress, becomes hijacked by distractions that provide short-term stimulation with no long-term gain. You feel this every day you ignore the hard thing you know you should do, every time you scroll instead of act. Every time you plan instead of execute, your brain isn't punishing you, it's trying to adapt to the rules you're feeding it. And when those rules are built around avoidance, hesitation, and emotional safety, your brain does what it's designed to do. It rewires to preserve energy, not produce power. But that's not because it's weak, it's because it's efficient. It adapts to what you give it. And if you don't give it a target, a mission, a fight, it forgets how to lead. But this forgetfulness is not permanent. These circuits can be reawakened. The focus systems, the motivational circuits, the stress resilience pathways, all of them are plastic, moldable, available. They are still alive, and the way you bring them back online is by reintroducing deliberate strain. You must impose challenge on the system before life imposes it for you. You must take back control of your energy, your chemistry, your biology, not with force, but with structure. Cold exposure, fasted training, deep focus sprints, breath under tension, each one of these is a signal to your nervous system. Wake up, engage, adapt. You are being called back to war not with violence, but with purpose, not with chaos, but with command. The longer you wait, the more these systems weaken. But the moment you begin, even if it's imperfect, even if it's small, the circuits start to fire again. The mind begins to remember what it was made for, and you reclaim what was never lost, only neglected, the relentless capacity for action in the face of resistance. Modern comfort misfires ancient circuits, creating a conflict between the brain's design and the life it's being asked to live. You carry within you a nervous system calibrated for survival, attuned to pressure, designed for clarity under chaos. Your ancestors didn't have the luxury of idleness. Their brains were shaped by the need to hunt, to protect, to endure. The systems that kept them alive now live in you, unchanged, waiting, repurposed. But instead of facing real threats and worthy struggles, your brain is now bombarded by a constant stream of low-level stimulation, alerts, notifications, comfort foods, passive entertainment. And those ancient circuits don't know the difference between real danger and digital noise. They react. They adapt, and in doing so, they begin to misfire. What once was a tightly tuned system for threat detection and energy deployment becomes confused. You begin to feel overwhelmed by simple tasks. You panic in moments that don't require panic. You feel fatigue before real effort even begins. Because your system has been trained to respond to false inputs, rewards with no cost, stress with no resolution, pleasure with no pursuit. The dopamine system, the very structure that fuels action, becomes hijacked by surface-level stimulation. It gets triggered not by discipline and forward progress, but by convenience. And as a result, the motivation to pursue real challenges begins to fade. The more you surround yourself with frictionless options, the more the brain adapts to expect them. It stops preparing for resistance, it stops learning how to climb, it forgets how to fight, it rewires around ease, and in doing so, it loses its edge. You weren't built for comfort, you were built for purpose, but comfort, when left unchecked, becomes a cage. And what feels like relaxation turns into decay of drive, of vision, of identity. Not because something is wrong with you, but because the biology inside you has been tricked into thinking the war is over. But the war is not over, it has only changed shape. The war is now within. The battle between what you were built to do and what the modern world tells you to settle for. And the cost of ignoring that war is steep. Apathy, anxiety, fatigue, and a quiet, corrosive sense that you are meant for more than this. Because you are, the circuits of drive and discipline were not put in you by accident. They were given to you for a reason. And they are still there, waiting to be reactivated, not through stimulation, but through challenge. Not through escape, but through engagement. The longer you feed your brain empty fuel, the harder it becomes to hear the call. But that call has never stopped. It's in your restlessness. It's in your discontent. It's in the fire that won't go out even after years of peace. The answer is not more comfort. The answer is controlled confrontation with resistance, because in that struggle, your systems remember. Your biology remembers, and the man or woman you were built to become begins to rise. Controlled stress is not punishment, it's precision. It is the scalpel that cuts away weakness and reactivates the ancient circuits that modern comfort has dulled. The nervous system, when exposed to calculated discomfort, doesn't collapse, it recalibrates, it remembers. It turns back on, because buried beneath layers of inactivity and distraction is a system designed to respond to pressure by growing stronger. The body adapts to resistance, but more importantly, the brain does. And that adaptation isn't metaphorical, it's biological. Neural circuits for focus, drive, and emotional control become more efficient, more stable, more precise when exposed to hardship that you choose. The key is that the stress must be voluntary and structured. Cold water, breath holds, fasted movement. Focused effort under fatigue. These are not random challenges. They are inputs that activate specific systems in the brain. The prefrontal cortex becomes more stable. The dopaminergic pathways learn to respond to effort instead of outcome. The hypothalamic, pituitary, adrenal axis recalibrates so that your response to chaos becomes calm instead of panic. When you control the stressor, you gain access to the switchboard of your own neurobiology. You get to train how your system responds to fear, discomfort, and resistance, not in theory, but in real time under pressure. Without this form of training, your brain forgets how to lead under fire. It becomes reactive, fragile, overrun by minor triggers that would have never registered as threats in a system that's been tested. But a tested system is a trustworthy system. It doesn't break when pressure rises. It locks in. Controlled stress is the fire that forges that capacity. Not all stress is destructive. Unregulated stress breaks you, but controlled stress daily, intentional exposure to resistance, builds a mind that doesn't flinch, doesn't fold, doesn't delay. It builds a system that sees pressure and locks in with purpose. You can't read about resilience. You can't talk your way into grit. You have to feel it physically, neurologically, emotionally. You have to train your nervous system to hold the line when everything in you wants to retreat. That's the threshold where the rewiring happens, where pain becomes precision, where chaos becomes command, and where fear becomes fuel. Every breath you hold in discomfort, every second you endure under effort, you are sending a signal to your brain. This is who we are now. This is how we respond, not with collapse, but with control, not with hesitation, but with hunger. You are teaching your brain to lean into the resistance, not because it's easy, but because you know what's on the other side. Controlled stress is a sacred space. It's the gym for your soul. It's the battlefield where identity is reforged through effort. And in that place, your biology doesn't lie. It reflects the truth of your training. If you've avoided the fire, it will show. But if you've lived in it, daily, deliberately, it will show even louder, because the calmest person in the storm is the one who has lived in the wind, the one who has made discomfort a companion and turned controlled stress into the sharpening stone of the mind. Neuroplasticity is the divine gift hidden in human biology, the ability of the brain to physically change in response to experience, effort, and repetition. But it is not a passive process. It is not something that happens while you wait. Neuroplasticity is activated through intensity, through friction, through deliberate engagement with the hard thing. The circuits in your brain, the ones that govern action, focus, will, and identity, do not rewire when life is easy. They rewire when the system is under demand, when energy is being summoned, and when you are doing something that feels just beyond your current capacity. That is where the change occurs, not before, not after, but in the pressure itself. When you hesitate before doing something difficult, when your body resists motion, when your thoughts begin to scatter, that is the exact moment neuroplasticity is waiting. Because at that edge, your nervous system is malleable, the stress hormones are elevated, the synapses are more likely to fire and rewire. The brain is in a high-stakes learning mode, and if you push through, if you act in that very moment of tension, you carve new grooves into your neural pathways. You send a message to your brain, this is how we behave now, this is who we are becoming. And if you repeat that process day after day, under voluntary strain, you begin to shift not just your behavior, but your biology. The warrior's brain is not born, it is built, and it is built through neuroplasticity under fire. You are training the brain to stop seeking the path of least resistance. You are conditioning it to see effort as reward, to link the act of struggle with the release of dopamine. Not for the finish line, but for the climb itself. This is a reorientation of the reward system, a rewiring of what your brain considers valuable. You are turning resistance into a signal for progress, not a trigger for retreat. And that shift is what separates those who endure from those who quit. Not talent, not genetics, but trained neuroplasticity under repeated, intentional pressure. The power of your nervous system is not that it is fixed, it's that it is moldable, but like metal, it only reshapes under heat. The heat of discomfort, the heat of discipline, the heat of doing what you don't want to do at the exact moment your brain is begging you not to. That's where the door opens, and only those who walk through that door again and again begin to live with a different brain. A brain that does not flinch, a brain that does not stall, a brain that has been sculpted, repatterned, and hardened through exposure to purposeful difficulty. This is not just about getting things done. This is about becoming someone whose very biology reflects their mission. Someone who doesn't need motivation to act because their circuits are already aligned. Someone who doesn't crumble under weight because their brain has learned to grow stronger under load. This is neuroplasticity in motion, a sacred process not for the passive, but for the persistent. And every hard thing you choose to face is an invitation to engage it. Daily exposure to challenge is not punishment, it's preparation. Your brain is a living system that demands engagement, and if you don't choose the challenge, it will choose one for you. You can either create stress with intention or be consumed by stress without direction. The nervous system is not neutral, it adapts to what you feed it. If you feed it delay, hesitation, ease, and emotional comfort, it becomes a master of those states. But if you feed it precision, pressure, discipline, and resistance, it becomes a weapon of clarity, execution, and resilience. This is not a metaphor, it's measurable. The circuits responsible for focus, endurance, and emotional regulation strengthen only under load. Every day you push against resistance, whether it's through movement, fasting, silence, or breath, you are delivering a coded message to your nervous system, adapt. You are teaching it to handle pressure with poise. You are building a body that doesn't break at the first sign of friction, and a mind that doesn't collapse when comfort disappears. And the key is consistency, not extremes, not chaos, just structured, deliberate exposure to the very things your brain would rather avoid. Because that's where the transformation happens, not in the break-through moment, but in the repetition of facing friction until your system no longer fears it. Your nervous system doesn't need permission to adapt. It needs repetition. Repetition under discomfort. Repetition under self-imposed friction. That's how plasticity works. That's how drive becomes identity. You cannot expect your mind to operate with power if you've trained it through avoidance. You cannot expect focus if you've trained distraction. You cannot expect resilience if you've never trained recovery under tension. Every skipped workout, every delayed task, every time you retreat from hard things, you are wiring your system toward fragility. But the opposite is also true. Every time you move when it's hard, every time you act without emotional permission, you are laying down a neurological path toward power. And over time, the accumulation of these small battles forms a completely different internal reality. The stress response system becomes tuned. The dopamine system resets. You no longer chase surface level stimulation, you crave challenge, because you've conditioned your brain to release reward in the presence of effort. You begin to move through the world with a different speed, a different energy. You stop flinching at life. You stop waiting for confidence. Because your nervous system has learned through repetition that it is safe in struggle, that it can operate under pressure, that it doesn't need ideal conditions to act. This is the warrior's way, not one moment of greatness, but 1,000 moments of disciplined confrontation with challenge. That's what rewires your brain. That's what sharpens your mind. That's what makes your nervous system a servant of your mission instead of a slave to your emotions. And every day you engage that process. You step further away from comfort as identity and closer to something sacred, something earned, something forged. Because you don't rise by chance, you rise by choice. You rise by training the circuits to serve the purpose written into your biology.